I moved into the Oak Ridge Hills community for peace, not drama. After spending 2 decades in bustling cities working in cybersecurity, I was ready for slow mornings, freshly brewed coffee, and weekend gardening. My wife Dana was even more excited. She'd always dreamed of a quiet suburban home with a big backyard and a porch swing. We thought we'd found our slice of heaven. But Oak Ridge Hills came with a string attached, the Homeowners Association. On the surface, the HOA seemed standard. Neatly trimmed lawns, color-coded fences, and no holiday decorations past January. I figured if I kept to myself and followed the basics, we'd be fine. I was wrong. The issue started 3 weeks after we moved in. I installed 3 high-definition CCTV cameras, one above the garage, one overlooking the front yard, and another at the back near the garden. It wasn't just habit, it was necessity. I worked from home, dealt with sensitive client data, and had dealt with enough weird incidents in my old neighborhood to know that peace could be an illusion. The day after installation, I received an envelope tucked under my doormat. It was a citation from the HOA violation. Exterior modifications without prior approval. Remedy within 7 days or face daily fines. I laughed at first, thinking it had to be a mistake. The cameras weren't huge. They blended with the trim and didn't point into any neighbor's yard. But the HOA president, Karen Whitmore, yes, an actual Karen, didn't find them so discreet. Karen showed up on my porch that afternoon like a sheriff coming to collect a debt. "You need to take those down," she said, arms crossed and chin tilted like she rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "On what grounds?" I asked, trying to keep it civil. "They violate the HOA's aesthetic harmony guidelines. Cameras are considered eyesores." I smirked. "So are some Christmas decorations in July, but I haven't complained." She didn't laugh. I pointed to the fine print in the HOA's handbook. Security devices aren't explicitly banned, and I'm within my property boundaries. Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." And just like that, I had a target on my back. Part 2. Within days, Karen launched a campaign against my surveillance operation. That's what she called it in her HOA meeting notes, which someone anonymously forwarded to me. Apparently, my security system was being labeled a privacy risk for the community. She painted a picture of me as some kind of paranoid outsider, someone who was monitoring children and invading neighborly trust. It was ridiculous. The only thing my cameras monitored were my own front porch, driveway, and backyard. Still, Karen printed flyers. Actual physical flyers. She went door to door with them, claiming I was recording everyone in secret and creating an unsafe environment for families. Dana was livid. "She's turning the whole neighborhood against us." I wasn't surprised. HOA presidents like Karen thrived on power, and people who couldn't find control in their own lives often tried to seize it over others. But I wasn't about to roll over. So I filed an appeal with the HOA board. That's when I realized the board wasn't really a board. It was Karen and her 2 best friends, Ron, a retiree who never said a word, and Sharon, who once fined a neighbor for having a pink flamingo in their yard for less than 12 hours. They denied my appeal in under 5 minutes. Karen emailed the decision with the same cold smugness she carried in her posture. "Your surveillance devices are in breach of Section 4, subsection B, of the Community Uniformity Agreement. Further fines will accumulate daily unless removal is confirmed by visual inspection." I responded politely but firmly. Unless you can show a legal statute or clause that overrides my right to secure my property and my footage, the cameras stay. That's when things got petty. The next week, someone dumped lawn clippings in my driveway. Another night, we found our mailbox door unscrewed. A few neighbors started avoiding eye contact when walking their dogs. I knew the game. Karen was trying to isolate us, wear us down. But I wasn't new to harassment, and I sure as hell wasn't new to documenting it. Every little stunt, I had it all. Time-stamped, clear audio, license plates, faces. Karen and her little squad had no idea that their passive-aggressive antics were getting logged in high-definition clarity. Then came the night that changed everything. It was 3:47 a.m. when I was woken by my phone. Motion alert. I blinked away sleep and pulled up the live feed. My driveway camera showed a figure, hooded, crouched, working at something near Dana's car. I shot out of bed, yelled for Dana to call the police, and slipped on some pants. I grabbed my flashlight and rushed outside. By the time I got there, the thief had fled, but they'd left behind a broken screwdriver and deep scratches around the driver's side lock. The cops arrived quickly, thanks to Dana's clear, calm call. I showed them the footage. It had everything: the thief's approach, face partially visible, and the getaway path across the common lawn behind Sharon's house. The officer nodded, impressed. "This is gold. Most folks around here don't have cameras." I smiled. "Mine were almost taken down last week." The officer's words echoed in my head. "Most folks around here don't have cameras." That was the exact reason I had installed them. And the exact reason Karen's obsession with controlling the neighborhood had become a dangerous joke. The following morning, I sent a polite but pointed email to the HOA board with the subject line, "My cameras just helped stop a crime. You're welcome." I attached 2 still frames from the video showing the thief's face and another of the scratch marks around Dana's car lock. I included the police report number and made sure to highlight one sentence in bold. Had it not been for the homeowner's security footage, identification would have been impossible. No response. By that afternoon, the thief's blurry photo was circulating on the community app. Neighbors started knocking on my door. First Mr. Langley from across the street, then a couple named Rachel and Dawn, whose trash cans had been ransacked the week before. One by one, people came to ask if I could check my footage. Turns out the same suspect had been casing the entire block for weeks. He had broken into Rachel and Dawn's garage, possibly even siphoned gas from Langley's car. My cameras had picked up more than just one crime. The ironic part? All those neighbors who had cold-shouldered us now stood on my porch asking for help. Their expressions were sheepish, sometimes apologetic. And I helped them. Every single one. I spent hours scrubbing footage, organizing clips, and burning them onto USB drives for each household. I even installed an extra floodlight near the side gate that covered a blind spot the HOA had refused to address. That week, Dana baked muffins for the officer who had first responded, and we invited some of the neighbors over for coffee to discuss forming a real community watch group. But Karen stayed silent, completely silent, until the following week when she came storming down the sidewalk like she was marching into a courtroom. She didn't knock, just rang the bell and crossed her arms, already mid-glare. I opened the door. "Hello, Karen," I said, calm as ever. "We need the footage from your backyard camera," she said. There was a theft behind the clubhouse. Someone stole a garden generator. I blinked. You mean the HOA clubhouse? The one that's off limits to residents except during meetings? She didn't flinch. That one. And you want my footage? Karen paused, almost like the taste of her own words was bitter. Yes. The delicious irony was almost too much, but I kept my expression neutral. I thought the cameras violated community aesthetics. That's not relevant now. Oh, I think it is, I replied. For a moment, I could see the war inside her. Pride versus necessity. Her face tightened, her jaw flexed. Finally, she muttered, "Look, we need your help." Karen stood on my porch, arms folded tightly across her chest, her perfectly ironed blouse puffing out with every shallow breath. The fact that she was here, asking for help from the very person she'd spent the last 3 weeks trying to fine into submission, wasn't lost on either of us. "I'll need that request in writing," I said casually, like she was a vendor asking for access to restricted server logs. "Email will do. Official HOA letterhead preferred." Her lips pursed. "We don't have time for— If it's important enough for you to come over here in person, then it's important enough to follow procedure," I cut in. "Don't worry, I'm sure the HOA has a policy about that." I didn't close the door. I just waited. She stood there for another few seconds before turning on her heel and stomping off without another word. Dana, who had been listening from inside, emerged from the kitchen with a look that said, "Did that just happen?" "I think Queen Karen just bent the knee," I smirked. The next morning, like clockwork, I received the email. Formal language, HOA letterhead, a full 180-degree tone shift. "Dear Mr. Thompson, in light of recent events and in the interest of neighborhood safety, we request access to your security footage from the evening of March 12th, specifically from the back of your property, facing the Greenbelt and HOA clubhouse. We appreciate your cooperation and assistance as a valued member of the Oak Ridge Hills community. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore, HOA President, valued member." I repeated, chuckling, "Now I'm a valued member." I reviewed the footage before handing anything over. Sure enough, the same hooded figure had slipped through the alleyway behind my property and disappeared into the shadows near the clubhouse. Not 5 minutes later, he emerged with a bulky object in a trash bag and took off through the park. I packaged the footage neatly, even threw in a high-res still of the thief's partial face and a time-stamped sequence of the incident. But I also attached a cover letter, one that made my position perfectly clear. "Dear Karen, I'm happy to help ensure the safety of our community. However, I trust this cooperation indicates an understanding that my cameras are not, and have never been, a violation of HOA guidelines, especially in matters of resident security. If there is to be any future conversation regarding my security system, I expect it to be grounded in reason, not preference. Respectfully, Evan Thompson." That same afternoon, I received another email. No apology, of course, just a thank you and a new clause that would be discussed in the next HOA meeting, one that would propose security devices as optional and permitted with homeowner discretion. Karen was folding, slowly, painfully, but folding nonetheless. The HOA meeting was held in the clubhouse auditorium, the same one the thief had looted just a week before. There was something poetic about that. For the first time in months, the place was packed. The usual scattered chairs and bored expressions were gone. This time, residents came with questions and opinions. I brought a flash drive, my laptop, and a stack of handouts. Not to show off, just to be ready. Karen stood at the front, clearly rattled but trying to project calm authority. Tonight, we will be reviewing adjustments to the HOA's policy regarding surveillance equipment. She trailed off as people began raising hands. Mr. Langley stood up without being called on. Before we talk about rules, maybe we should thank the guy whose footage actually caught the thief, he said, gesturing toward me. Without Evan, we'd still be scratching our heads. The room clapped. Not a polite little golf clap. Real applause. A few even cheered. Karen cleared her throat. Yes, and we do thank Mr. Thompson for his unexpected contribution. That was her way of not choking on the words "I was wrong." She pulled up a new proposed clause projected on a screen. It now read, "Personal security devices such as external surveillance cameras may be installed by homeowners so long as they are not directed toward private windows or areas not considered public-facing." I raised my hand. Karen hesitated, then nodded. "Mr. Thompson, I'm fine with that," I said, "but I'd like to propose an amendment that footage from any such devices may be used upon request to assist in community safety investigations, with the homeowner's consent, of course." That got murmurs of agreement across the room. Sharon, the flamingo hater, looked surprised but nodded. Even Ron, who usually sat like a statue, gave a faint shrug of approval. Karen had no choice. The new clause passed unanimously, and with it, a silent but undeniable shift in the neighborhood's power structure. After the meeting, neighbors came up to me, not just to thank me for the footage, but to share concerns they had previously been too intimidated to voice. The HOA had bullied a lot of people into silence over the years, but now they saw that it could be challenged and changed. As Dana and I walked home under the streetlights, she slipped her hand into mine. "You know, you didn't just win an argument tonight. You helped this place grow up a little." I squeezed her hand. All it took was a thief, some cameras, and Karen's pride. We laughed, but the truth was, something much bigger had changed. The cameras had started as a security measure. Now they were a symbol that HOA intimidation had met its match. After the meeting, there was a noticeable change in the way people walked around the neighborhood. Less tense, more relaxed. Neighbors who barely made eye contact before now greeted each other like friends. It was as if the paranoia that Karen's reign had instilled was finally lifting, one handshake at a time. I kept my cameras up. No one questioned them again. In fact, 3 more homes on our street installed their own within the week, including the Langleys. One even asked for my help choosing a good system, and I happily walked him through the setup. Karen might have still been president on paper, but the people had spoken with their actions. The HOA board, sensing the shift in momentum, began taking a softer approach across the board. That stupid approved paint shade pamphlet, gone. Lawn height inspections, paused indefinitely. Overnight guest vehicle citations, suspended pending reevaluation. For the first time since we'd moved in, the HOA wasn't wielding power like a hammer. They were trying not to get caught with it in their hand. But Karen? She didn't take it well. She started showing up to meetings less frequently. When she did attend, she mostly sat quietly, letting the vice president do the talking. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was erosion. Her influence had shrunk to almost nothing, and I hadn't lifted a finger in retaliation. I let her dig her own hole, which, as it turned out, was deeper than I ever imagined. One day, I got a letter in the mail. Not from the HOA, but from a law firm. Apparently, Karen was being sued by a former homeowner for harassment and personal damages tied to excessive fines, many of which were issued outside the bounds of HOA authority. My footage and emails were listed as exhibits, not because I had turned them over, but because the police and lawyers had subpoenaed records related to Karen's pattern of misconduct. Dana and I read the letter over dinner and exchanged a long, quiet look. "You didn't even have to touch her," Dana said softly. "I just told the truth and hit record," I said. The cherry on top? A few months later, I received a formal letter from the board thanking me for my contributions to community safety and offering me an open seat on the newly formed Neighborhood Security and Standards Committee. I declined, not because I didn't care, but because I had already done my part. I had proven that standing up to power with facts and calm resolve could do more than screaming ever could. The cameras were still there, blinking quietly on my eaves, always watching, always ready. Not to catch neighbors breaking grass-height rules, but to protect what truly mattered. Months passed. Spring turned into summer, and the air of fear that once clung to Oak Ridge Hills was long gone. The HOA still existed, technically, but now it functioned more like what it was meant to be: a neighborly organization for common upkeep and communication, not a fiefdom for suburban tyrants. Karen eventually stepped down from the board altogether. No announcement, no farewell letter, just a quiet update on the HOA website replacing her name with someone new, a retired firefighter named Bill who grilled burgers for the whole block every 4th of July. No one missed her. People started organizing things again: neighborhood potlucks, garage sales, even a movie night projected against a neighbor's big white fence. And it wasn't just the activities, it was the tone. Everyone was more relaxed, more involved, more human. The cameras on my house, once the source of threats and fines, had become the gold standard. People didn't fear them anymore. They asked about them. I gave presentations at 2 different community events about how to install affordable systems that protected homes without invading privacy. My footage was even used in a local news segment titled Neighborhood Watch 2.0, when homeowners take safety into their own hands. I still remember the closing line from that reporter, standing out in front of my house. "Sometimes it's not about fighting power, it's about plugging it in, mounting it to a wall, and pressing record." I couldn't have said it better myself. Even the police department dropped by once, not for a complaint, but to personally thank me. The footage I had provided helped them identify the serial clubhouse thief who turned out to be connected to several other robberies in neighboring communities. It was a bigger deal than anyone realized. The irony never faded for me. The very tool they tried to ban had become the cornerstone of the neighborhood's rebirth. As summer reached its peak, Dinah and I sat on the porch one evening, sipping iced tea as the sun dipped low over the treetops. "I gotta admit," she said, "when this whole thing started, I thought we were headed for war." "In a way we were," I said, watching the kids play catch in the front yards. "But we didn't need fire, just light." She smiled at that. I thought back to the first notice, the one that claimed I was in violation of HOA regulations for unauthorized surveillance equipment. How fragile that threat seemed now. Just paper, just noise. Now, the cameras were permanent, and so was the change they sparked. My story wasn't about revenge in the end. Not really. It was about reclaiming space, about using truth when others try to control with fear, and about reminding people that you can protect what's yours without ever raising your voice. I didn't take down the HOA. I just showed them what was really happening, and they crumbled under their own reflection. All I had to do was press play.